Hey everyone, this is Cary and Matt on the podcast The Way, presented by RUDIS, and here we are with another podcast session. And Matt, how'd your week go this week?
It's good, I mean, I'm sure we're in similar places in different realms of life, but we're in the post Christmas. We're still in the middle of the busy season, so things are still operating at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
But I know with you once you reach the new year, it's almost like you're starting to run downhill a little bit. Not completely, but you're at that tipping point where, you can see the conference championships. You can see the NCAA championships right on the horizon. So how are things going with you guys?
Good. We're rocking and rolling, right. As well as anybody, Christmas time, everything heats up for the wrestling season as well. You get through Christmas. Actually beforehand, you either have Vegas or you have Reno or, and you get to Christmas and you roll through Midlands and do all that good stuff. And then before you know it, you start hitting your conference meets and a few other those duels. For us, we get ready to take on Arizona State and Iowa State and Harvard out at ASU. We're going to wrestle in Chase Stadium where the Diamondbacks play and out on the baseball field. So it should be a cool event for our guys and for our fans and guys will catch a plane and catch a little trip out to Arizona and get some warm weather, I think.
Yeah. So how are they running that format with all, are they running multiple mats on the baseball field or how are they doing it?
No, I think it's well, actually they might have multiple mats now I think about it. We'll have 3 duels and we have 3 different time slots. And I don't think it's one after the other. I think there is 2 mats going. Actually, that's something I didn't ask. I just looked at our time slots and we start at like 12:30 and then I think we go again at 3:30 and then the final one is at 5:30. So we'll just be rocking and rolling. But I bet you it's going to be 2 mats is what I think it's going to be. But anyway, listen, I don't know. I had this question and I think you've gotten it before and from a person that wrote in and it was basically like, we were talking about the U.S. Open and competition and you always get the question. I get the question: are you going to come back out of retirement? And no, I'm 46 years old. I'm not wrestling anymore, Matt. So
you're done. Are you sure?
I'm done. Sure. And you were talking about the other day, so I guess I'll let you take the lead, and then I'll just jump in there with you.
I guess it's one of those questions that I thought about a little bit when I was in coaching. But a couple of weeks ago, I was down at the U.S. Open in Dallas, and just watching some of these guys. And number one, I admire anybody that's willing to put it on the line, no matter how young or old they are. If they're willing to strap it on, put on the singlet, go out there and compete, I got a ton of respect for anybody that's willing to do that at any level. But, I guess the skeptical or not the cynical part of me, but it's like I was looking at some of these guys out there at the Open and I'm like, a lot of these guys, they just don't have any business still competing at this level. They're not really, you could tell they're not training or competing at the level that you need to compete at to be at a tournament like that. And so, the thought that I was having throughout the weekend is like, if I was still coaching, how real do you actually keep it with your athletes how much of the truth would you actually tell your athletes and how much should you reserve to actually allow them to dream? But if they're dreaming unproductively, if they're like, say a guy is coming to you every day, like, Coach, I want to be a national champ. And in your mind, you're like, man, buddy, like, if we got you to the NCAA tournament, that's going to be a heck of an achievement for you. So where do you fall on the side of that conversation? Like how real do you keep it with your athletes as far as like grounding them in reality, and how much do you think is beneficial to fuel the dream, how unrealistic it might actually be?
Yeah, I think I think you're always going to take it case by case. Look, let's just start out. I'll go back to when I was 8 years old and I said I wanted to win the Olympic Games. Well, nobody crushes a kid's dreams, right? That's what starts to make us and shape us and gives us purpose and gives us drive. And I was lucky. I always say I found my path early, and it gave me purpose, and I always knew where I was going. Then I think there's a time, when you get older and more mature, then reality sets in and you start having more honest conversations with some people. So I get it with you. When I hear a guy tell me, hey, I'm going to make the, I've had those kids. We've all had them. I remember I had one kid, his Twitter handle was, I believe it was 2012 future Olympic team member, and the guy had never even started for us. And I want to say like, and so I think there's sometimes you tell people, hey, you're kind of living a dream here, and I did have a guy. Honestly, I had a guy when I coached club back in Baltimore, and he's actually doing well for himself now. He found his purpose. He's coaching. But I got this crazy email when I was at a camp, and this was, Matt, it's been so long. I would say 2008 or 9 or something. I got an email, and he says, hey, I'm going to make the 2012 Olympic team, and I'm going to come down and have you train me. And he hadn't wrestled since his sophomore year in high school, and he ran track through college. So I'm like, but to his credit, he showed up a year later, which I kind of remember sitting there on my phone, and I was like, "Read this email I got." I'm like, "Yeah, see you when you get there, buddy." And sure enough, the guy showed up a year later. And at the time, Alex Mead was the top recruit in the country, and he was 15 years old. So I said, "Hey, why don't you wrestle this guy?" And he wrestled this guy, and he got schooled. And he's like, "Man, that guy's pretty good." I said, "Well, that guy's a kid, and he's not even close to making an Olympic team." So let's get serious and say, look, help me with club, help me coach. And he's actually an excellent coach now. He's up in Baltimore, Maryland, and he's doing well for himself. And that kind of gave him purpose and drive. But then, yeah, I think, so I think it's give and take. I think it's each person that comes along. What I pay attention for as a college coach is when some kid's got his sights way up here and they're way out in left field, and it affects training. Like he's training for something that we're not there yet. You're not there. So kind of live in the moment you're in now and the purpose you're in now and what we're trying to accomplish right now. And let's inch it, step by step. And then let's reassess each year. Or maybe we reassess after 2 to 3 years of your college career. And then it makes sense. And it's the same, I guess right now, it's the same as a college coach. There's finances involved in sending kids to Vegas every year. And I get this with parents. Hey, are you going to send guys to Vegas? Yeah, we're going to send people to Vegas to compete in the U.S. Open. We're going to send guys to Akron. But it's got to make sense too, right? We don't want to spend all this money and go up there and go 0-2 if you're not ready and you're not freestyle oriented and things of that nature. So, but I guess if a guy's in the U.S. Open and he's 30-some years old and he's working construction and thinks he can make the Olympic team and he's paying his own way, I don't know. I don't really know how you stop him.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, back to what you said originally, case by case. I think that's really what it is. And I think we've all been in those situations, like, with those guys that have those seemingly at the time they're making those statements, like, "Hey, coach," a guy that's never been a starter, they sit down at their postseason meetings with you and say, "Hey, coach, I want to be a national champ." You don't necessarily, you don't want to squash his dream, but I think you've got to temper it to make it more realistic. Like, hey, we would probably actually be doing the kid a disservice if we didn't give him some level of realistic expectations. Like, I think it's sometimes when you set the goal too high, that it's so unrealistic, it actually has negative repercussions on the guys.
It does.
They're like, "I'm working so hard, coach. I'm nowhere close to being a national champ." I'm like, yeah, like if you would have listened to me, said, "Hey, let's bite off, let's take this one bite at a time. Before we eat the entire plate, let's eat a bite, see if we like it. Let's see if we can be a national qualifier first. And then if we can attain that, then maybe we push that goal and push that mark, extend the mark a little further." And I guess one of the examples that I had in mind when I was at Penn State, and I don't know if you remember this kid, James Yanishanis.
Yeah.
But James was this guy, he wasn't blessed with a high level of skill. He wasn't overly technical. He wasn't overly athletic, so on the surface, like he didn't have any of those things that you would look and say, yeah, let's fuel this dream you have, because he was talking about being a national champ all the time. And in reality, he was one of those guys with his skill set. And like, if I was very realistic and if the coaching staff was realistic with him, they probably would have stopped him from dreaming if we would have said, "James, there's no way you're ever going to be a national champ, honestly." And this guy, like, he's the one guy in my career, like, he ended up being an All-American, Cary.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys on the surface looking back. And James, if you're listening to this is actually a compliment. What I'm trying to say about the guy is like, he was so dogged in his determination and his work ethic that he overcome all these seemingly, shortfalls that he had. He didn't really have any talent. Wasn't technically skilled, but he ended up making it on the podium. And I'm like, well, thank God I never told this guy, like, what are you talking about being a national champ? You can't do this. There's no way it's possible. But he ended up making his way on the podium. And so on that side of it, I'm like, man, thank goodness I let this guy keep dreaming. Thank goodness the coaching staff at Penn State continued to fuel this guy's dream, even if we thought it was unrealistic.
The only time, you're talking with that normal scenario, like we tell everybody, which I tell my kids, hey, shoot for the stars and hope for the moon, right? So it sounds like that's where he was at. He was shooting for the stars. He wanted to be a national champ, and probably had he not had that mindset, he would have never been on the stand. And it's the same thing I tell guys when we're recruiting and bringing to Campbell. Look, not everybody's going to be a national champ. That's the reality of it. But everybody in the room better train like one. And if you can't train like one, then, stop talking this nonsense. That is a conversation I have had with people. Stop talking this nonsense, and you're the first guy to leave the room every time practice is over, or you're the last guy to show up, or your output in the zone of when we're working is not even close. Then there's definitely going to be some hard honesty. And, sometimes the honesty's been, hey, I don't think this is for you. Maybe you need to move on. And I think that's important as always as a coach, to be honest in that aspect of, are you doing enough to get done what you say you want to get done? But it's in James, when you're talking about, I remember him, he wasn't very gifted. He was a worker. He was a workhorse, and because of that mindset, you got the most out of him. The question is, if you were to talk to him again, would he say, in reality, now that I look back, I wasn't going to be a national champion, but I got further than I should have based on the tools and the weapons I had. And I always tell people, it's like when I was in high school, I believed I could beat John Smith. Now, in reality, here I am at 46 saying, no, I was never going to beat John Smith, but I thought I could. Which is why I probably did the things that I did and got as far as I did because of that mindset. Yeah.
So I think to your point, I think that's actually the truth. If your athlete is actually lying to himself, that's where you got to step in and speak the truth. Like, okay, don't say all these things. Don't say you want to be a national champ, but you're not living the lifestyle. You're not working with that lifestyle. You're not training with that mentality every day. And like, hey, let's stop lying to ourselves here. Stop lying to yourselves. And then once we stop lying, then we can have a real conversation. Once you're honest with yourself, then I can be honest with you. But in this situation, I feel the best need is like, hey, I got to call out that you're lying to yourself. You're not being truthful to yourself. And, that's something you can't let slide. Dreaming doesn't really hurt anybody, to your point. Like, no. Dreaming, as long as it's backed up by work, I can get on board with that all day long. Now, I'll probably scale some truth into that every now and then, introduce some truth every now and then. But, I would never want to just flat out squash a guy's dream if he's living and doing everything he possibly can to make that happen. But yeah, I mean, it was just a thought, because I think, and this gets off in another tangent. I think we're getting ready to wrap this up, and I think we've talked about this enough. But I think this also goes into another conversation about the regional training centers and how these athletes are being compensated. The one thing that I don't necessarily agree with, paying guys to be training partners for your athletes. I think there's an area for that right now where, a lot of these guys that are getting funded by these regional training centers don't have it. They're never going to be in the mix to make a team, make a national team, even get on the podium at the U.S. Open. But they're being funded to saying they're chasing this dream, but in reality, they're just a training partner for some college guys, right?
Well, that's really always been the reality. We go back and forth because I'm in the fight here with the coaching, and you got you have the bigger schools are going to have more booster support, and look at Penn State, how much money they have rocking and rolling through their program. But that's always really been the reality, because the reality is, when I looked at the U.S. Open, there's always some weights that are like, wow, like these guys are going to battle who's going to be on the team. And for the most part, though, a lot of the weights, through time, since if I go back from when I was a young kid, really starting to watch freestyle and that stuff, and from 84 on, the number one guy was the number one guy, and number two was really never close to him. Like they were 3-2 matches, but he was always in the driver's seat. And you still face that reality. I remember when we first got the RTCs, and West Virginia had one of the best ones at the time. The Mylan Pharmaceuticals came in and created six positions for these guys making $30,000 and $40,000. They would work part-time at Mylan Pharmaceuticals, 20 hours a week, making $30,000 and $40,000, benefits in the company. And Turnbull would call me and say, I can't fill these positions. I'm like, that's reality. There aren't that many good guys out there. Some guys you're just wasting money because they're young, they're single. You give them a job offer, the guy gets to work out 2 times a day and look good and go out on the weekends, and then you had the guys who were serious about it, but they weren't close to being the number 1, number 2, or number 3 guy. The reality is, after college, there's only so many guys that still have the heart to continue want to go on with international. So now we're in this, it's really just a loophole, right? So now you can have more guys training, but I'm for it in that capacity. I'm for some guys who are tied to programs. I really think over time we're going to see the number of coaching staff increase, because I think the NCAA is moving further and further away from it. But I've never been for the 250-mile recruiting radius, because that's really what the RTCs blew up about. And the truth is, we always had this ability to do this, right? We always had this ability to pay people to be there training. But when we were able to launch the 250-mile radius, everybody jumped on board with it. So now they're talking about re-shrinking it because people were against it. And now we're going to be doing what we should have done and try to make a better U.S. team and stuff. So we have seen some benefits from it. And the rich will still get richer, as they say. I don't worry about it too much. In the end, each team can only put 10 guys on the mat. People say, what's a recruiting magnet? I'm like, great. I hope they get the 20 top guys and they all go to one team, because only one can be on the mat at one time, and you got 10 guys just sitting there and won't have to deal with them. Yeah,
this is one of those things that Ben and I have talked about a little bit. And I'm like, look, you take away the RTCs, the haves and the have-nots, or however you want to describe the program, they're still going to be the same.
They're going to be the same.
Iowa's had built-in advantages for a prolonged period of time, and you take the RTCs away, and they're still going to have some built-in advantages. Same for Penn State, Ohio State, and the bigger programs and the mid-majors, or the programs that are less funded are still going to face the same challenges. So,
well, this jumps into, not to get, and we're kind of getting off topic from what we started on, but the image usage for athletes, everybody freaks out when they first hear something. But again, I go back to, it's not my problem. It's not going to be like you've just created another workload for a coach. That's all you've done. It's the recruiting and where it falls and how it shakes out is still going to be the same. You just created more headache for certain coaches. That's what you've done. It's not going to change. So maybe everybody's got all these things, like, and I've even said it, the booster's got a car lot and he hangs a picture of a guy and says, I'm using his image. Here's an extra 10,000 a year or whatever it may be. It's still going to be the same guys, same guys going to same places. So it's not going to really change anything. I think some people are going to have more headache. I can guarantee you this, coaches don't want it. They don't want the image usage. It's fair. I'm not against it. I mean, if a kid can make money off his name, who are we to say that you don't deserve to make money off your name? If you're talented, you're talented. We wouldn't stop anybody anywhere else. If a kid was an unbelievable piano player at 10 years old and he could go and play in New York and get paid for it, there's nobody there stopping him saying he can't make money off his talent. It's really the same thing. Now, it's going to change, how kids are recruited? Definitely going to change.
Yeah. And I think just like everything else, the biggest impact is going to be on the revenue generating sports, really. and how that falls out. But like you said, the other side of the coin that a lot of people don't talk about, they talk about all these built-in advantages that these RTCs create for all these programs, but they hardly ever talk to a lot of these big time programs that have the bigger RTCs, and they'll tell you that's a lot of work, man.
A lot of work.
Like a ton of work and that's why they have a bigger staff, because you've got more work on your plate. You've got to spread that workload. So, I mean, there are advantages, but there are challenges as well.
I mean, staying on topic to where we're at, Matt, when we're talking about realistic goals, look, we want an RTC at Campbell. I want a full out 5 guys training there. But right now, my steps are I need to take more flights every year and be able to take more of my backups to keep them wrestling. And I need to wrestle more schools outside of our conference. And so right now, my time in any fundraising that's where I'm at. I'm inching in that zone. So for me to sit here and say, yeah, we're going to have 10 guys, I'm not there yet. We're getting there. We're working our way there. And it's the same as talking about, some guy sitting here saying, I'm going to go win the Olympics when he can't start on his college team yet. I mean, you got to have reality and work toward the reality that you're in and keep, getting there. We want to have an RTC. It's coming down the road, but we're inching our way to it right now.
Yeah.
But all right, well, that was a little different than our normal talks, but hopefully somebody got something from it. But so I guess this is Matt and Cary with the podcast away, and we'll be back next week with another podcast. And if you have questions, please leave them at the bottom of the video or reach out to RUDIS, and they'll get it to Matt and I. All right, man. Have a good week, Matt.
All right, Cary. Appreciate it. Take care.